Mark, welcome to Mind Body Peak Performance.
Nick, so good to be here, brother. Thank you.
So we will get started with the normal question, the warm-up. But before we do, you go by Mr. Noots. Why is that?
Oh, too funny. So a few years ago, a guy on Facebook, a really well-known executive coach, opened up a mailbox full of my test tubes of product. These weird test tubes. A lot of our stuff comes in test tubes, and he poured it out, and he said something like, "This is the." And a bunch of people, of course, are in the comment thread going, "What is that? How do you use it? What is it? Is it better than this, or is it worse than it, or what is it?" And one of those guys was a guy named Matt Gallant, who owns a company called Bioptimizers, which I'm part of now. And so he said, "Hey, man, can you make an introduction to this Mark guy? Mark Effinger is my stage name." And so we ended up arranging a Zoom call a month later, and so it was like July of that year, 2020, I think. And myself, our COO who was in London, Andy, and Matt Gallant. And we're on this call, and one of the first questions he asked is, he goes, "I'd like to buy your company." I said, "Oh, it's not for sale." And he goes, "That's the right answer." And so we had this incredible dialogue, and he bought boatloads of product. And he tested everything. And because all of our products were custom, because we wanted to match physiology and neurology to the product blend, he had hundreds of different variations in massive spreadsheets that, Google Docs that went forever. And then about 5 months later, about 6 months later, it was in November, the end of November, we did a Facebook Live event to launch this brand new brand that we co-created called Nootopia. So before it was called Web Nutrients, and then we not only he not only tried all the products, but we refined the formulas for all the products, and we made them brand new products. And so we did the vocoder, right? So it's like I was an FBI informant, and then just put up a still image on the Zoom call, and so it was really cool because the idea was, let's launch a company together. Let's launch a product together and see if it makes sense. See if there's any traction in the marketplace. See if it really is something that would work. And if it doesn't work, we're not going to destroy your brand. We're not going to destroy your name. We're not going to destroy your products. You'll get a better company at the end of it if it doesn't work, right? And he calls me. We do this Facebook Live event. He calls me like 3 minutes after we hang up. It's about a 2-hour event we did. And he goes, "Dude," he goes, "we only lost 21%. And I'm thinking, "Oh, well, it's over." That was fun and everything. And we learned a lot, but yeah, it's over. And he goes, "No, you don't understand. If I lost 80%, I can fix that. I can make that a success." He goes, "Losing 21%, that's like rocking." So a year later, so we did that. We did it for a year. We grew extensively. We created a multi-million-dollar company within a year. And then Dave Asprey, on doing a podcast with Dave Asprey, he outed Mr. Noots as Mark Effinger. So it was great. It was good timing. And we had already agreed that we really liked working together. The Bioptimizers culture is unmatched, I think, in industry. And I've worked with the guy that raised me in culture was the founder of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. So I've had an opportunity to work with incredible people, and including the guy that financed Nike and became a culture leader in that environment in the Pacific Northwest, the Silicon Forest, as we called it. So anyhow, that's how that came about. Long answer to short question.
Yeah, I don't think that you know this, but I actually discovered who you were back, I don't know if it was 2020 or 2021, because I traced some of the ingredients that you were using from one of the formulas. I found Web Nutrients, and I managed to link it all together. So, but you guys did a great job of keeping it a secret. It was difficult to tell, and I did a lot of Googling and searching patents and all kinds of stuff like that to come to the conclusion that it was you.
That is so good, man. I love stealth. Thank you, Nick. That's really cool to know, man.
Yeah, that's a lot. And at some point along there, you became interested in a class of ingredients that improve biological function, and particularly the brain, called nootropics.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was fun. I did it twice actually. In the early, actually in the mid '90s, I was listening to a one of those AM radio or FM radio call-in shows, dropping somebody off at the airport in Portland, Oregon, and the guy that was on the show was talking about a thing called Huperzine A, which is an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. Basically, it helps break down the enzyme that would break down acetylcholine between the synapse. Acetylcholine is your thinking component for the brain, right? The neurotransmitter, neurochemical for the brain that helps you memorize things and think and recall. And so I was like transfixed by this guy, great DJ voice, talking over the radio and talking about this stuff. I was dropping somebody off at the airport. I stopped at a phone booth when you had to have phone booths. I called the guy and said, "Hey, dude, where are you located?" And he said, "I'm in Oregon City," which is only 30 minutes away from downtown Portland. Went and met with him. I consulted to him for free for 6 months, and helped him triple his business, and then used that leverage that I had with him at that point to start a company called Web Nutrients back then. And what we ended up doing was human growth hormone, a precursor to human growth hormone, an effervescent tablet you would take called a secretagogue. So basically, you would take it at night before you went to bed, and then during delta sleep, it would help secrete. It would help to improve the secretion of HGH in the body. So that got my feet wet in that. I had a bit of a biochemistry background from the time I was very young. In fact, my first chemistry set.
Oh, wow. You have it right there. Oh, how cool.
I've got my second one here too. It's about 3 times the size, but yeah, that was 6 years old. In 6 years old, I got my first chemistry set. By 7, I was doing vacuum and high voltage and vacuum technology, and a lot of electrolysis technology and those kinds of things. So I worked fast. And again, this guy that became my stepdad was at the time my dad's best friend, and he was a famous microbiologist that worked on the NASA programs. So I got this really great, biochemistry insight from him when I was very young. So it wasn't a distant leap for me to go into kind of this neurobiology stuff. I wanted to be smart. At one point, I know I've got it here somewhere, but I was business partners with the founder of Century 21 Real Estate, and we did brainstorming software. So I had this penchant for flying around the country to mid-sized to large corporations and teaching their management teams how to think creatively. So again, this cognitive performance thing, and so the way I got into this in the more recent frame was 2008. My wife, who we had 3 children born at home, she had overdosed. It looked like a suicide on oxycodone. She became addicted in 1998, and then in 2008, she had done enough of it to kill a horse, and it killed her instead. So that got me pissed that doctors would be overprescribing this very addictive drug, and it also got me thinking. I have a family member who was a heroin addict for decades, and then methadone following heroin, and I think she still takes heroin or takes methadone. Great, incredible woman, really, really smart, really bright. But the ravages of drug abuse were something that you couldn't ignore. So it's how do you, my thing going in, the questions, like when you're starting, I wasn't starting it as a business, I was starting it as a mission. And it was, how do you get an addict to recognize they're an addict and to be able to address it to the point of doing something positive about it? So I went to a rehab center a couple hours from where I was living at the time. I was living in northern Washington, and and just interviewing the people that were incoming that were, they were just fried out of their minds and saying, "Hey, why didn't you come here a year ago or months ago or a week ago or just before you took that last hit? Like, what kept you?" And they would say stuff like, "It's expensive, it's embarrassing, it takes a long time, it takes 6, 12, even more weeks to get off it." And then the one that was a big epiphany for me, Nick, was when they said, when I get out of here, I'm gonna be addicted to 2 or 3 things, maybe 4 things anyhow. They're gonna have me on these prescription meds, and right for and there's and I they showed me the the cocktails they were going to build for these people over the next 6 to 12 weeks. There were 26, 27 different meds that they would be prescribing or over this time, right? One is to detox, or one set was to detox, another set was to try to stabilize, another set was to maybe get their nutritional levels working, and then another set was going to be the kind of the recovery drug, and then there was going to be a set that were going to be the ones that basically felt like they were still on heroin, or they were still on speed, or they were still on meth, but they were legal and they were prescribed and you could get them at Walgreens, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was the thing. And so my goal going in was, what I found was that people made decisions when they were wasted. I mean, like if you've ever had a friend, or you yourself have had the experience of taking a hit of weed or having your fifth martini, and then you have some, or taking some vitamin A, some acid, and then you're suddenly expounding on all of these amazing things that you think are so cool, and then when the next day or the next week you get straight and you go, what an idiot that was.
Yeah.
But it sounded so profound at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it. And so what I did is I started cooking up neurochemical precursors. I would pair them and I would send them to my software customers, my brainstorming software customers, because they were like low-hanging fruit, easy to find, cool people. They trusted me because I'd worked with their management teams and stuff. And I got a little over 1,000 of them, about 1,100 of them, to sample my wares. And I would just, every week I would send them test tubes of crappy tasting powder and say, try this and tell me if you die or puke or if you feel good. And so there's your business beta test 101. Find a group of people that trust you because you did something significant, and you mowed their lawn when you were a kid and they trusted you. And and after 3,000 prototypes, was able to collect enough of these neurochemical precursors and antioxidants and adaptogens and anti-inflammatory compounds and vitamins, and then the nootropics themselves, and there's a thing called a choline donor. Whenever you increase the cycle time of your brain, it's kind of like overclocking a microprocessor, and things start to heat up. And so in order to supply the necessary neurochemical precursors, one of the primary ones is acetylcholine. So you want to put a thing called a choline donor whenever you build a nootropic stack. A stack is being a formula that has these nootropic outputs, or that help increase your brain power, or whether it's lateral thinking or the way you feel, your moods. We call it state change. And so, yeah, that's what I did.
So if you were to describe people why nootropics are so profound, the way I describe it is that it's like a molecular discipline. It makes everything you do easier. And like you're trying to instill new habits, instead of like trying to fight every single day, you have this. And if you choose to use them after that, even better. But if you choose to stop them, you can maintain those habits and you can get through whatever challenging circumstances you're facing. And as I see it, it's like a way of raising your baseline, even if you stop.
Nick, two things. One is I want to steal that clip from you, because you communicated that. Your verbal fluency was awesome, and you communicated that better than I could communicate that. So that's one. That's part one. Part two is you're absolutely right. What we specialize in, or what nootropics can do, is they can help you master state change. And when I say that, it's state optimization. So one is, we all know that the cycle time between task switching eats up a lot of mental bandwidth. So when you're having to move from one task to another, there's the gap in the middle there where your performance kind of just falls through the cracks, and it takes a while to get back there. One of the things nootropics can do is they can help you cross that chasm at a performance level. Another is, you build neural pathways in your brain. So basically, your neurons, you create these blooms of new neurons through a process called neurogenesis. And right when neurogenesis is occurring, you basically have fertilized your brain. You've basically augmented a thing called BDNF, or brain-derived nootropic factor. Something that, like our mushroom drink, we have one called Collagenius, which is for nootropic-oriented mushrooms and adaptogens, and it helps to do this BDNF. Lion's mane is a huge BDNF contributor. And then all of our nootropics are made. What our definition of a nootropic isn't just a brain enhancing solution that works while you're on it. It is a brain enhancing solution that helps you accomplish a certain state that's valuable to you, like focus or love or understanding or verbal fluency, or connection, or intuition, and then or relaxation, right? A chill state. So it can do all of those, and different products do. They help you master different states. But the other thing is, when you're creating these new blooms of neurons, what new neurons are looking for is a task. They're looking for something to do. If you don't do something, if you don't, activate those neurons, they will quickly just go dormant. So, when I say quickly, I don't mean within seconds, but within days. So, one of the most powerful things you can do is put yourself in an environment where you need to get something done. Use a nootropic that activates that area of the brain with those neurochemicals and neurotransmitter activities that are key to helping you accomplish that task, and do those in concert, and it'll build a new neural pathway in your brain. It'll build a shortcut from your concept of what you're trying to do and the actual process of what you need to do to get that done. And over time, those become permanent parts of your thinking process. And when I say shortcut, I don't mean that you're reducing anything. You're actually dramatically improving your connections, because the neural pathway might be 200 different pathways in the brain that you're actually activating that are going towards same long-term memory, something that you read years ago. Here's a great example. We're back to the movie Limitless. Bradley Cooper takes the clear pill. He gets this funky clear pill from his former brother-in-law, and he takes it, and he goes to his crappy little apartment, his walk-up, and suddenly, as he's coming up the stairs, the lights get a little bit brighter. The colors and hues are more vibrant. And he hears the wheel of a bicycle going click, 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 as it spins. He gets to the top of the landing, and there's his landlord's sweetheart is there. She's got a book bag over her shoulder, and she's bitching him out. She's just trashing him because he's always late on his rent, and he's, and she's telling him what a loser he is, and he looks like a loser. He looks like a homeless guy that you wouldn't even think twice. He goes, "Oh, that's a homeless guy." No, that's Bradley Cooper in a role. But he glances at her book bag while he's listening to her trash him, and he sees a book on a legal book, and he recognizes he was trying to lay some this college girl that happened to be in a legal class, and so he kind of ran across that book in her apartment while he was waiting for her to get ready, and so suddenly he's able to kind of talk fluently about the chapter that he read, kind of this thesis that was in the book, this legal book, and he's talking to her about it, and it just stops her in her tracks. He's hearing her, and he because he's so intuitive with her, so he's got such a good insight on kind of like how people operate at this point, because his wakefulness and awareness is up because of the nootropic he took. He's able to actually get this incredible insight and kind of talk her down from being pissed off at him, and eventually they end up making out in her apartment. So that is like, we would love for nootropics to all be like that, but that is the ultimate expression of what a nootropic can do once you've optimized it to your neurology and physiology, and once you get yourself in a condition where doing that little boost, that cognitive boost or that significant cognitive boost, can be energized and activated. It's not an instantaneous thing, as you well know. I'm assuming that you've tried some of the stuff that we've got and others, but in the scale of moving from, we call it sick to superhuman, they are a pathway to accelerating your cognitive, physical, and neurological performance in ways that very few other things do, even including illegal drugs.
Yeah, back in 2013, I first discovered nootropics, and I was in school. The kids around me were doing prescription stimulants, the very common ones known as study drugs. And I knew that those all had side effects, and didn't know what they would do long term. And I came across the concept of nootropics, started with paracetam, tried Noopept, and interestingly enough, You mentioned HD vision. That's exactly what I experienced when I tried Noopep for the first time. My vision went from like 720p to 1080p, and I like was noticing a lot more vibrancy in colors, and my senses just felt like they were all enhanced. And then I started exploring all of them from there, and I've tried, I don't even know how many, every nootropic I could find that has some safety data at this point. So yes, that is a very familiar experience.
So, Nick, what did you find from those? Two things, probably three. I don't know. In that exploration, you would find those different orientations, like the GABA, like nephracetam is very GABA centric, right? So it chills you, but it also gives you that wakefulness. Paracetam, pramiracetam, right? Then Nupeptin, any of the peptides, of course, in there. And which ones? Like, did you find yourself creating combos?
Yes, I would always stack them with a cholinergic compound, usually alpha GPC, sometimes CDP choline. I had choline bitartrate, or however it's pronounced. Didn't really like that much. Yeah, and I found my favorite were the ones that I actually felt. So when I discovered phenylpiracetam, that was my favorite because it was very apparent, and I would only use it like once per week. But when I did, it was just like lights on. I was performing, and I would always combine these with some choline. And I still do that on occasion. There were some companies that used to have those combinations with a couple other things. I think it was solbutamine, or however it's pronounced.
Butamine, yep.
Yeah, that was a good combination with phenylpiracetam and alpha GPC, I believe it was. But now I like to use pre-designed stacks that other people have done that have more research behind them. But sometimes I'll still get out the scale and weigh the powders myself and do it the old-fashioned way.
I love that, man. It's funny. I'm in my office and lab here is in downtown Burlington, Iowa, little town of 26,000. And so we're on a main street. We're 2 blocks from the cop shop here, and we've got our lab is in full view of anybody walking on the street. And we're in the downtown opportunity area. So it's funny as hell because we're constantly creating, doing R&D and making all kinds of weird stuff. And there's always scales, and there's PPE occasionally, and all these kinds of stuff. And it's that same exact feeling. It gives me a great sense of joy and humor when I see people walking by and doing the double take. I kind of walking by, walking their dog, and I look over, and then they go, "What?"
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
it's great.
Yeah, and back in college, I used to also help people. Like when they would have questions, they didn't necessarily want to use the same study drugs that everyone else was. I wouldn't prescribe them anything, obviously, because that's illegal, but I would have them research certain compounds, like if they wanted to improve their creativity or their verbal fluency and ability to speak, maybe some aniracetam. And then, of course, I leaned heavily on the naturals, a lot of the botanicals and extracts that have been used for thousands of years and were staples in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda and a lot of the old systems. And then for every once in a while, when someone wanted a boost, I'd help them with find their specific preferred compound.
You should. How come you're not working for us?
Maybe someday.
Maybe someday, man. I love it. Where are you located?
I'm in Austin.
Oh, that's one of my favorite places in the world. Do you know Wizard Academy out there?
I don't.
So check it out when you get a chance. It's I'm a founding member of Wizard Academy, which it used to be called Buda, Texas, but it's right there in Austin. Mm-hmm. Austin, I think, has grown enough that it actually sucked Buda into it. But it's great. It's on 20 something acres, and it's basically an academy. It's a communication academy based on neuroscience and how the brain works with colors, language, phonemes of words. The breakdown of words, how sentence structures are augmented, and then there's also a business division as well.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, take you there sometime when I'm in Austin.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Mark, we should rewind. We've been talking a lot about specifics and diving deep into like the different protocols and stacking and everything, but we haven't done much around defining nootropics and how they work in the way to improve, I guess, utilize them and improve their effects.
That's awesome. So, great question, Nick. So the way that we find nootropics are things that actually will not only accelerate your cognitive processing, but also create a new higher baseline. And Matt and I, so I'd been building a book for years. It took Matt Gallant and Wade Lightheart, my partners and the co-founders of Bioptimizers, which is basically it's a Bioptimizers core functions we have a goal of making biological optimization available to everyone on Earth. So we have a big lofty goal of creating a pretty massive infrastructure to help people recover their physiology and neurology in meaningful ways. So what we've done is we've created these fairly complex, fairly layered nootropic stack. We call them a stack because it's a stack of different elements that all contribute to the process. We master a thing called potentiation. Potentiation meaning when you have two components and you put them together, is the outcome or the output of those less than one of those or more than all of those? And typically it's a 2 + 2 = 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 10. And then we keep building like that. So we create these really powerful things. And what we've done with them is we've looked at the biggest challenges facing us as entrepreneurs, as students, as human beings, and said, what are the cognitive areas that we need to help boost and basically put a scaffolding underneath so that people aren't going from -3 every day and trying to get just to 0. Like, how can we make 1 or 2 plus 1 or 2 the baseline standard so that when they need to go from, it's easier to go from 2 to 10 than it is from -3 to 10. And so what we've done is we've created these combination of solutions in the form of what we call stacks again. So I don't know if you can see those, but here's these are a thing called Brain Flow. That's a oil cap surrounding a condensed powder cap, and then a thing called Upbeat. So those are two caps that have two different but complementary functions. And that is, the Brain Flow is going to give you a really nice long-term flow of acetylcholine in the brain, a little tiny boost of dopamine, or L-Dopa, and then a little bit of brain oxygenation as well. So it's going to increase the oxygen levels in the brain, which are going to improve processes like ATP or adenosine triphosphate. And then the ones below here, these are the Upbeat. And so Upbeat is a serotonergic, primarily serotonergic, and again, a bit of acetylcholine in there, and really, really good for anti-inflammatory. And so, by the way, here's our new packaging we're coming out with. So this is a cool mag pack. Yeah.
I got it right here.
Oh, Dopa Drops, bro. That's a killer.
Yeah, I'm actually, I used Brain Flow earlier this morning, and I thought I was going to have to stack it with some Upbeat for a little serotonergic boost for this podcast, but it turns out this was plenty. This little bit of coffee was all I needed.
Fantastic. I love that. So the Dopa Drops. So what we've done is we've created a whole series of products, each one kind of oriented towards very specific types of neurotransmitter activity.
Can we cover those? Can we cover what the basic neurotransmitters are? Because I know it's basic, but it's really important to understand how these work differently.
Yeah. No, I think it's key. So thank you. Yes. So there's a dozen primary neurotransmitters, but there's 4 to 5 that we rely on. These are the goats of neurotransmitter activity. So acetylcholine, as we talked about before, that's your kind of memory, recall, and storage. If you want to remember something, activate acetylcholine in the synapse and get it to do its thing, and it will go and it'll go flow through the synapse between two neurons, and it'll go and then store things in the ganglia, in these different parts, different cells within the brain, and also make recall easier. So that's a really important thing. Having memory but not being able to actually access that memory is bad news. So we call that dementia. So that's one. So acetylcholine is one. If you find yourself having a cocktail after work, that is activating what's called the GABA receptors of the brain. GABA is the chill receptor of the brain. And what's really cool is, in fact, probably one of the most prominent GABA, or recognized as a GABA product, is made by Onnit, and it's called Alpha Brain. And Alpha Brain is just GABA in a capsule with a couple of other cofactors. but it was the one that really kind of like in 2011 when I was finishing up the first products. Alpha Brain was the only company out there actually making a finished stack of sorts. That's a GABA stack. So, and we have a thing called Gabalicious, which is one of our stacks, right? So that's a drink. We also have this thing called ZAMNER Juice. So ZAMNER Juice is another GABA centric precursor, and it's really great. I built this one because a woman came to me who owned medical establishments in the Portland metro area, and traffic in Portland is now parking lot most of the day. So she wanted something that would make it. There was a movie that Michael Douglas was in called Falling Down, where he's stuck in traffic in LA and he finally it just breaks and he just gets out and he's about to kill people. And I made this because she said that at one point she's going to get out of her car, go into the truck ahead of her, drag the guy out of the cab, beat the shit out of him, take his truck over, mow over all the cars, a la Terminator. And she said, I need something that's going to chill me down quick. So I made a sublingual spray that basically is a GABA-centric spray. So it basically takes advantage of that. And when I say sublingual, you spray it under your tongue. And what it does, it's actually great for podcasts, by the way. So what it does is it dramatically increases the GABA activity in the brain, which basically brings your parasympathetic system, right? Your sympathetic is a fight or flight, right? And the parasympathetic is rest and feed and those things. So it brings your parasympathetic system into focus, meaning that it's going to reduce anxiety, it's going to reduce stress, and it's going to clear your head up in a really meaningful way. What I used this for originally was to when I would have to get on stage and speak at 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night. I needed to have clarity. I needed to have good flow state, Stephen Kotler 101. But I didn't want to be awake at 3 a.m. because I was downing a bunch of coffee or doing one of these quote unquote study drugs or something similar. So that's where it works for me. And the cool thing is you can combine a bunch of different pieces that we make and get into these very specific states that you want to accomplish. We have a guidebook for doing that. But those are two, right? So we got acetylcholine, we got GABA.
Before you continue, I find GABA to be really interesting because that's one that most people chase to unwind. I wrote a post on a lot of the best non-ethanol, like alcohol alternatives that give you that similar feeling that everyone's looking for, that don't leave you wrecked the next day. And Gabalicious and ZAMNER Juice are good contenders. I don't feel much from ZAMNER Juice. I'm not sure if it's because I wasn't putting it under my tongue, or I'm not doing enough sprays, or if I'm already having like the alpha brainwaves and the relaxation from using L-theanine earlier in the day.
So that's a really good point. So yeah, L-theanines are great. I mean, it's one of the components of this, of course. But and we use pharma-GABA to cross the blood-brain barrier, so that among other things. But yes, so you may have really good GABA levels. So you're not going to. And one of the things again that I want to emphasize is there are a number of ways to articulate neurotransmitters in the brain. One way is to just give the brain the neurotransmitter. Find a way to get it through the blood-brain barrier, which is a kind of a filter for keeping crap out of your brain, and then use the neurotransmitter. The downside of that, and the reason we don't do that with anything, is that you downregulate the body's own ability to produce those neurotransmitters. And for anybody that's used, again, these study drugs, study meds, they'll notice that there's a downregulation of the dopaminergic activity in the brain. So it hyperexcites it. It does dopamine and adrenaline, or norepinephrine is the chemical name for it. And the problem with that is that signaling. Here's what happens. Can I tell you about what happens?
Yeah.
In these, and this applies to serotonin as well. Serotonin is kind of the mood balancing neurotransmitter. That's the one you think of when you think of a antidepressant. That's an SSRI, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So let me explain how serotonin, or how an SSRI works in the brain, so that your audience understands that how it can become problematic over time, and how it's worthwhile to try to find either adjuncts, like something that helps you to reduce the amount of the med, again under a doctor's support and help. When you do the way the neurons are formed, they kind of look like in this capacity, they look like mushroom heads with volcanoes on them, and the volcanoes are two-way streets. They'll basically they will pump their neuron pumps. They will pump out certain neurochemicals into the other receptor, and then they may flow it back, or they may just use it up. It may flow then into other synapses and is used, and it'll transmit data, or it'll cause a certain neurotransmitter activity to elevate, or to escalate, or to actually be repressed. Let's take the case of a SSRI. When you're working with the neurotransmitter serotonin, and you surround the neuron gap with a calcium ion cloud, what you're doing is you're basically trapping that neurotransmitter, in this case serotonin. You're trapping it between the neurons, and you're also recycling or recirculating that serotonin. So it's going back and forth, and it's flowing through this. Two things are happening there. One is you're getting a potassium, which is kind of the opposite of calcium ion. You're getting a potassium buildup on the neuron pumps, and that's going to harden them and make them less flexible, so they don't pump as efficiently. So now you've got to get more serotonin in there to do the same activity you were able to do with a minimum of serotonin. The other is that calcium ion channel is also creating a signaling that's telling the brain to quit making serotonin. I already got all the serotonin I need, man, because it's trapped between it. It's not new serotonin. It's reused. It's recycled serotonin, which sounds good if you're into green, but this is not about real recycling. And that signaling that is what's called a downregulation. That downregulation means there's not enough serotonin left, like native serotonin left, to be able to fulfill the needs of your body or your brain. And that's why when the meds wear off, you might not feel as good. You might be more depressed. You might be unmotivated. Same thing happens with Adderall. Is another, we talk about study drugs. Adderall is a famous one. Is the amount of adrenaline that it causes, this adrenaline flow, and dopamine that is cycling in the brain, causes a downregulation of the body's own dopamine stores. So once it wears off, you lose motivation. You are a couch potato. You don't think very clearly. It's just you plummet. Your performance plummets. So instead of doing that, like you just showed Dopa Drops a moment ago, Dopa Drops is a great example. I created Dopa Drops as a dopamine precursor. Dopamine is reward, and motivation are the two primary pieces of dopamine. It's also great for memory. If you have dopamine flowing while you're actually trying to memorize something, and you have acetylcholine in the synapse, you will remember it like nothing else. And so it's a very, very powerful way to help augment the mental processes, especially when it comes to memory and motivation. The other thing is when you read that same passage, or you see that same show, or you do that same event, it will come back to you. So that same feeling you had, that same state you had when you originally did that, and you had the dopamine flowing, you'll get that state again. So you can actually just think about what you were doing, and you'll go to that state. The dopamine will start flowing, or the adrenaline will come. It's a great way to get yourself into state. And you see superheroes do it, right? Where they kind of like close their eyes, and suddenly they become, a green monster, or, some Flash or whatever. And it's that kind of conversion process that's going on. So those four. So you got acetylcholine, again, memory recall. You've got dopamine, right? Motivation and reward. You've got GABA, chill, and mood stabilization. And you've got and serotonin, GABA, mood stabilization. Then you've got norepinephrine, or adrenaline. The other name for it is adrenaline. And that's going to be motivation. It's going to be fight or flight. It's going to activate, right, the sympathetic nervous system, which is really good if you have a tiger chasing you, or if you need, if you don't have normal motivation. But it is also an abusive neurochemical. The overuse of, or the overcaffeination, or the overexcitation of our system will have a tendency to cause a lot. Cortisol will spike considerably. Suddenly your sleep goes away, your quality of sleep goes away, depth of sleep goes away, and there are other factors. But those are kind of the 4 or 5 primaries that we spend a lot of time on. There are many others. There's oxytocin, right? There's a lot of really cool ones. Anandamide is one of my favorites. We're building a product suite around Anandamide, which is the kind of the orgasm, the joy, the really cool killer, gosh, I feel incredible type thing. It's one of the like oxytocin, it's a really great connectivity. If you want to really know somebody and you want to get to know them, you want to really have groovy feelings with them, anandamide is a really good one. And it's yeah, it's very short lived, very short lived. So making it last long enough that it's effective, but not so long that you're just living in the an orgasmatron, is kind of the balance point we're trying to go to.
Sometimes called the bliss molecule.
It is the bliss molecule, exactly. Well said.
Yeah.
Did you ever see it? There's a Woody Allen movie from decades ago called Sleeper, where he wakes up in the future after being put in suspended animation, and I think Mike Myers ripped it off for his movies, but it's great. And when at one point he's trying to escape like the Big Brother cops, and so he hides in an orgasmatron, which instead of having sex, people go in an orgasmatron together. 60 seconds later, they come out and everything's good. And yeah, he goes into it and he's stuck in there for like 15 minutes while the cops are going through his house. And he comes out, he's just like, if you had 15 minutes worth of solid orgasm. So it's great.
Pumped full of anandamide.
Mm-hmm. Big time.
So is one of the reasons that a lot of these study drugs such as Adderall or modafinil are not sustainable is because they're directly inhibiting the reuptake of whatever neurochemical it is, and it's more blunt, and instead of raising the levels naturally through like a bunch of different pathways and systems, it's just focusing on this one, or not one, but very few targeted areas.
Yeah. There's two parts to that, Nick. Yes, and exactly. So one is that exact thing is it's just very, very, it's such a small set of neurochemicals that you're getting this unbalanced neurochemical output. The other is it's not providing any healthy elements or precursors. So you're basically depleting those over time. Anybody that's done modafinil to any extent, modafinil can be a lot of fun if it's as Dave Asprey was kind of the person that put it on the map in a big way. And this is not a slap on Dave at all. This is I think it was really important that that drugs like that arrived and we had an opportunity to experience them. The downside is you got to write a check the next day that you probably can't afford to, and that is aside from the fact that it's prescription drug, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. But the hard part of it is that the way that it over processes a very lean set of neurotransmitters unbalances the brain to a certain extent, and the other is it again downregulates those processes and it burns them out. It basically uses up those neurochemicals. You want to think of your neurochemical balance, the things that we just talked about, the serotonin, the anandamide, the dopamine, those. You want to build a concert. You want to build a symphony of those, and you want to articulate those in a way that's more like a graphic equalizer, like you'd have on your stereo, where you're bringing up a little bit of bass, a little bit of mid range, a little bit of treble, right? And you want to bring those up in the point where it's actually really pleasant. If anybody's ever heard a Kenny G album, past side one, where it's all like at one point you're going, if I hear another saxophone, I'm going to put a gun to my head. That's an imbalance. That's a neurotransmitter imbalance, is kind of that effect. And so you don't want to do that. You don't want to live in that state. You'll also notice any of your friends, because it's not you, someone who is not me. I think that's how they go in the forums, right?
Yeah.
Swim,
exactly.
Yeah. If you have a friend or a family member or whatever that has a tendency to either drink too much or take too much Adderall, we call it the Adderall drug because it's so strong on dopamine and adrenaline that if you try to distract somebody that's on it, they're not a happy person. They're just really excited about being focused on getting the shit done. And so, right, it's a good GTD tool, but you pay a price for it. And I think, from my personal perspective, is there are much better ways to do that. We create products. We've got one called Ultimate Focus, which has successfully replaced tens of thousands of clients Adderall in a way that's non-invasive. And again, they've worked with their medical professional to figure out a balance that works, and then finally, eventually, maybe titrate down. There's a thing called titrating down, where you basically split a capsule and split it again and again until I have one friend who's been doing it with an SSRI in our products. He's down to 1/16 of a tablet, and when he goes to his doctor goes, "There's no way that does anything." And he goes, "Yeah, but I notice when it's not here, even though I use this upbeat as my primary, it's So the brain is a weird deal, and no two are alike. And so it's very important to keep that in mind, and to also play and explore when you're starting to work with these neurochemical precursors and stacks. Is play and explore. We at Nootopia, we give you a 30-day roadmap to try and play with. We give you an app so you can tell us, how do you feel every day. You can go into the app and you can say, I took this, and it rocked, or it didn't rock, or it was really bad, or whatever. Because that input allows us to optimize your next order based on how you responded to this first order. And that's kind of an iterative process. I still do our Noots every day, and I know pretty much what to take. But as I get, maybe I get adaptation over 3 or 4 years, so I adapt to a certain neurochemical precursor stack. So I'll modify that stack to avoid that adaptation, or to work around it. And it's pretty cool to be able to have literally personalized nutrition, personalized nootropics, as a way to kind of circumvent these other, these things that you might be used to, just like doing coffee. I used to drink tea in the morning. I thought it was going to be really healthy, so I drink black tea in the morning, and I got the best British tea you could get, and right, PG Tips is kind of their standard for commercialized tips. And so I was living in Newport Beach. I would make up a pot of that every morning, and I thought, oh, good, I'm doing this, so I'm not getting near as much caffeine. Of course, I'm doing 24-ounce glasses of it, right? and and then going off of it, I would get these intense headaches, like one is to do when they try to pull themselves off of caffeine, because the vasoconstriction is kind of really messing you up. And that's adaptation. And once you go off of it, once you go off of like a super stim like caffeine for a while, or you titrate down and then eventually go off. I usually give a 2-week, 2 weeks for me is what I do, right? And by the time you're done, you can't believe when you wake up how clear your head is, how happy you are, how good your motivation is. And it's one of these things you go, why am I not doing this all the time? And it's because I love the feeling of a warm cup of coffee, cup of Joe in the morning. And that's so anyhow, I off track on that. But yeah, it's really, really important to discover the components that work for you, and then to optimize those. Like we have I think 12 components now we have a really cool, like here's our new box. So you got this box of Nootropics. So you got one?
I got one right here.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
A big upgrade. It's so much better than the old box.
Yeah. Isn't that cool? Yeah. And so it's got, tubes of powders and things, and it's got our mag packs of caps and kind of description. So we've got all these different solutions, but all of them might not be your jam. You might find that Upbeat and Ultimate Focus are your jam, and something else, ZAMNER Juice isn't your jam. And so we make it so that everything has a point system, and you can just go, oh, I want more Ultimate Focus, and I want more Gabalicious or something. And yeah, it makes it really cool to create this kind of flexible platform for people.
Yeah. This is Ultimate Focus. This is actually the one that used to be called Apex, I believe. And it gave me a headache sometimes I took it, but then more recently I was taking it again and I didn't get any headache. I felt great on it. So I don't know why at one point it gave me a headache, and that seems to have gone away.
So we've changed the way that we build the formulas. Like as you're raising the kind of like wakefulness component of it, which is a certain amount of that acetylcholine precursor and what kind we use, alpha GPC versus CDP choline, right? Versus some, and then also things like different kinds of carnitine, which might, they'll affect mitochondrial output, and some other compounds we have in there. And so doing that seems to make a pretty critical difference on how your neurology responds. So yeah, you nailed it, brother.
Yeah. To wrap a bow on what we were talking about earlier, I notice with modafinil, I still use that every once in a while when I know I'm not going to be distracted. And to me, it feels like I'm overclocking my mind. And it's great for that day, if I don't get distracted by anything, I don't need to be present for anything that like requires my full attention, that feels like it's wasting my time, and I can crush it in the gym. But the problem isn't that day, it's the next day for me. That overclocking comes at a cost, and I pushed it harder than I usually do, which means I'm more sore or I'm like less energetic. And I didn't notice that at first. And this is even when I take really small doses, like a quarter of a pill, which is like 40, 50 milligrams range as opposed to 200. And so even with that small amount, I still notice that it does have drawbacks that I didn't notice initially.
Right. It's interesting. So we just developed and finished a sleep product, two products. One's a spray, which is a microdose.
I love that one.
That's good. Yeah, yeah. And then we do a drink as well. And we, by the way, we just made a major upgrade to the drink. So I'll make sure and get you some. But that is, kind of the thing that I think of is sleep. The thing I say to myself is, and my clients is, sleep is the world's most powerful stimulant. If you get really good quality sleep for the duration that your body wants it, the recovery level is so high that you feel like a freaking rock star the next day, with or without anything. And and then you can compound it. You can, and we actually have a solution. We have some here. So we have a thing called Mental Reboot. And Mental Reboot is our solution. We have a nighttime and a daytime one. And the nighttime one takes advantage of a cognitive, there's a process that happens to our bodies is at night when we fall asleep, our brain shrinks. When our brain shrinks, it opens up around the capillary for the cerebral spinal fluid to flow. And that pulls all the toxins through the very thin membrane of the capillary, pulls it out through the spinal column and then out of the body. So you've got this detoxification going on because mitochondria, the brain is loaded with mitochondria, every cell in the brain, it's creating, as the byproducts of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the power source or the power energy of the mitochondria, the output of the mitochondria. Anytime you're doing a chemical conversion in the body, you're also creating some poop of sorts or some exhaust. And so in the brain, that's what that process is supposed to do. But if we don't get good sleep, we don't get good detoxification. So we created a solution to amplify the detoxification process of the brain, which also, by the way, gives you much better delta and REM sleep. And then in the morning, we have another version of it that's a sublingual. You hold the capsule upright, you tap it a bit, the powder settles down, you pour it under your tongue. And what it does is it establishes a baseline so that anything you put on top of it is amplified. So if you want more dopamine, it's amplified. If you want more serotonin, it's amplified. If you want more acetylcholine, it's automatically amplified. So it basically raises your baseline and creates this kind of new level, so that you can respond better. And yeah, it's a great way to start your day.
I didn't realize those were instructions. I'm pretty sure I just took that and just popped that pill.
Just orally.
Yeah.
It won't hurt, and it actually still works, but it works significantly more when you actually do it sublingually.
Oh, good to know.
I highly recommend it. Try it, Nick, tomorrow morning. Try the nighttime one tonight if you've got one, and do the AM one. So you get the PM one at night and the AM one in the morning, and then wait for 15 to 30 minutes as you feel that kind of new wakefulness come up, and then go, okay, here's what I need for the activities I'm doing today. By the way, Nick, there's a really cool thing we're going to be doing in the future. And this is future speak. I've hired a robotics expert here. We call him Mr. Robot. Charles Buckley is his real name, and incredible brain. And he's building robots so that we can make even tighter tolerances on our capsules, and we can tie, instead of humans taking the data that an individual gives us and using that as a baseline to formulate the new capsules and drinks and powders for that client. We're automating about 80% of that using technology so that we can increase our output because we're always pressed to the gills. But the other is we're going to increase the accuracy to plus or minus about 1 milligram. So right now we're plus or minus about 3 milligrams. And then, and the other side of that is we're building technology so that eventually you'll have the equivalent of one of those coffee makers on your kitchen counter, and it will read your Oura Ring and your Dream headset, and your Fitbit and your or, your Apple Watch and your Google Watch, and it will create your stacks in the morning for you based on what your calendar says you need to do and what
Yes.
you've
Okay.
told it you need, right?
Yeah.
So you got 5 podcasts today. You need to have verbal fluency from day one. You also need to go meet with your your accountant for your tax stuff, and you're going to work out at 3:30. You're going to train with one of your favorite guys, and it's leg day. So all of those can be dropped into this, and it will make the capsules and the powders and sprays for you based on that data.
I love that. And one thing that I found unique about your supplements, your nootropics, that I hadn't seen in any others, I'm not sure if this will show on video, but it's the capsule inside of a capsule. So if I had, say, meetings at 4 p.m. and I had like a tough workout in the morning, would you be able to design a product that would optimize my different states based on what I have going on my calendar and like the suspension technology?
Absolutely. In fact, that the oil suspension technology is really cool. We have another. Have you seen the rest of our caps? The that soft gel technology that we've implemented in the top of the caps. So that's giving us flexibility to be able to create a staged release. Dopa Drops is a great example. It's a staged release capsule. I created Dopa Drops to reduce the refractory period in men having sex. So I wanted to increase the quality of the orgasm and shorten the ability to go from having sex to not having to not being able to get it up, and so having sex and then a very short recovery period, having sex again and still having enough dopamine that you feel this great orgasm. That's really the impetus for that. I know it sounds selfish, but I'm an old guy and I love that. So, and the other thing is dopamine is actually, or L-Dopa is a great help for men that have ED. It really helps improve that. But what came out of it was, as I'm sending it to thousands of my customers and saying, try this, let me know what it does. And I didn't tell them what it was for. I just said, use this. By the way, wink, wink, it might be great before you have sex. And so the cool part of that was, what they came back with was, this is really cool. I get waves of dopamine all day, or I get waves of feedback all day, and or I get waves of motivation, but it never feels like I'm being hammered. It's not like Adderall where I have to do. It's more like, oh, I want to do, and I feel good about doing it. And so that was when you start understanding that the body and the brain are constantly doing enzymatic processes to create the end solution, the end chemical that your body needs to work with, and that each of those can go through multiple processes. The Dopa Drop is, starting with phenylalanine, which is a precursor to acetyl-L-tyrosine, which is a precursor to dopamine, which is a precursor to L-Dopa, or L-Dopa is a precursor to dopamine.
Yeah.
So yeah. So when you start looking at that, you go, oh, is there a way to kind of manage that so that you can leverage each of those processes so that you can get L-Dopa within 30, 40 minutes of taking the capsule, and then you can get the process of L-Dopa right, in another hour and a half, and you can get the process of creating the precursor to L-Dopa, another, that's starting to activate another 3 hours later. And by doing that, you can create these really systematic and strategic outcomes, biochemical, neurochemical outcomes that you want. And so you'll see more of those oil suspension caps. That cap in the middle breaks down at a 6.5 to 6.7 pH. The one on the outside, the one where the oil's at, it breaks down at 4.2. So the way that works is it breaks down in the gut. As soon as it hits your stomach and stomach acid, the outer shell breaks down. That oil goes into your gut. It activates because of the stomach acid, goes through the membrane, the membrane in your stomach, and it gets into your bloodstream. Okay, so that's going to increase your acetylcholine levels. It's going to do some other biologically activating pieces, and it's going to lie in wait for the next component. So now you go through to the duodenum, to the first, right, to your upper intestine. Now the second one, as the pH of your upper intestine starts to hit that 6.7 or so, it's going to break down, and now it's going to become available. It's going to go through the wall of the intestine, going through a really deep enzymatic process, because that's when your microbiota is really active right there. And it's going to make some changes right there at the microbiome. It's going to go through the wall. It's going to meet up with that oil that's flowing through your bloodstream now. It's going to bond to it. It's going to go through the blood-brain barrier, get into the brain, enzymatically separate into acetylcholine, pre-dopamine, and it's going to flow into that synapse at a very specified rate based on how the body naturally works. We're giving it fuel to do it better, do it more efficiently, and to be able to kind of program those neurotransmitters at a rate that makes sense.
That is so much more complex and interesting than my 2-3 ingredient stacks.
It's really, dude, it's really fun. I highly agree. I'm so glad to have met another brother who has been through that process of doing these things. And the thing is, especially if you're a high performance individual, you can't afford downtime. So when you're doing these experiments, you don't always hit it. Sometimes you overdo it. Sometimes you're up until 3 or 4 in the morning because you overdid it, and suddenly your next day is going to be trash. And so figuring out all these things is always a challenge, but well worth it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I want to circle back to also is you mentioned the whole precursor route and the conversions from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And I'm not sure if my thinking is correct here, but how I'm envisioning that as similar to peptides, where they're like suggestions to the body to do certain things. But if the body doesn't want to and it has a good reason not to, unlike the other things that are overclocking your body and your mind and come with significant consequences and downsides of doing that, when you're just making these quote suggestions, you're not forcing the same things, and therefore you're going to have fewer potential negative side effects, and it's going to feel, and you're going to perform better as a result.
You nailed it. I couldn't have said it better. The icing on that whole cake that you just crafted there is by working with these signaling molecules along with the precursors, in our case, primarily neurochemical precursors. But the other side of that also is, in every stack, we don't just focus on the brain. We understand that if you have an inflammatory condition, that's going to compete with your cognitive processes and performance. So we do an anti-inflammatory stack inside there. What a lot of people don't realize is B vitamins are actually enzymatic vitamins. They are responsible for a huge portion of the enzymatic processes happening in our body. So we do an extremely dense full spectrum B in that capsule as well. People have oxidative stress. If you have oxidative stress, again, it's another thing your body's fighting that takes ergs or mental units of power away from your brain. So what we do is we do an antioxidant stack in there as well. And then it's not until we've done all of that we get into the choline donor and the nootropic stack that builds on top of that. And then one other thing is what we noticed when I would do, and you probably experienced this when you were doing piracetam, on the very early stuff when you're doing 4.5 to 6 grams of piracetam, and you're coupling it with maybe with alpha GPC or worse if you couple with choline bitartrate, right?
Yeah.
So take those two. That's a great starter. How old are you?
28.
Awesome. All right. So you're a young and early guy. I'm 61 now, so this is awesome. All right. It's nice to hear somebody that's gone through the same world with me. One is when you take too much choline, and choline bitartrate is just literally raw choline. Too much choline can cause fuzziness, a foggy brain. You need a choline donor, because if you don't have a choline donor and you do a nootropic, it has a tendency to pull choline from the muscle, and you'll feel it in your neck, and it'll feel like you got a headache. In reality, you have a muscle ache from your neck and your traps, and it's just really, really messing you up. So you need to have a choline donor. But one of the other things that we kind of came to the conclusion of, and one of the critical things was when outside of about 20% of the world that really stays away from stims at any level, because stims just overstim them, or they've got very low GABA levels, and so they're always kind of high anxiety. For that, what we said is we found that as the enzymatic processes are going on in the brain, and your nootropic is going through the blood-brain barrier, and your choline donor is going through there, and they're kind of meeting up there and starting to play together. There's an enzymatic conversion process that turns the nootropic into and these precursors into the necessary neurotransmitters you want for the outcome, for the event that you want, or events you want, or the feeling, or the state change that we say. Is that takes a lot of ergs. That takes a lot of mental horsepower. So a lot of energy, typically ATP derived energy. So what we do is we include an ATP centric stim layer, and that little tiny stim layer makes it so that during it lives just long enough for that enzymatic process to happen. Your performance falls down that curve, and then it pops up out of that curve. During that time, if you have a little bit of a stim layer, so that you've got a little bit more acetylcholine, a little bit of dopamine, a little bit of norepinephrine running, then your wakefulness will overcome that enzymatic thing, so that once you pull out of the enzymatic curve, you'll be a rock star, because you'll have those two combined for a moment. You'll jump over the top, and then the nootropic will keep you at that elevated level for as long as it works or you need it. So
beautiful. I like more than a little bit of that stim layer. I like the Nectar X and the Power Solution and the Dopa Drops the most, unsurprisingly.
That's awesome. I will. One of the things, we're constantly working with different ways to get that stim happening. And like different ingredients, like teocrine is one of our favorites that we work with, and dynamine is actually a great precursor, and there's some others that are in this total in the flow of caffeine. There are different ways to pick off molecules within that, the degradation and metabolites of caffeine that you can play with. So,
have you tried Paraxanthine?
Of course.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, Sean Wells is a friend, and yes, it's I don't know if you've had him on your podcast, but yeah, good guy. Yes, and it's pretty cool. It's got, what I like about it is, paired with certain cofactors, the amount of euphoria you get, like phenylethylamine, right? And if you phenylethylamine and hordenine together with paraxanthine is badass as a pre-workout sup, and as a way to get kind of that euphoric, that it amplifies the reward system in a really, really powerful way. So
yeah, well, Mr. Noots, we have so much to talk about, and we could go on for at least 4 hours about this alone. I mean, I still have like 2/3 of my notes left for another day, because I want to be respectful of your time. So we'll start to wind this one down. But if you're open to it, I'd love to have you on again, preferably after we meet in person in a couple weeks, and continue this conversation.
Let's do it, man. I'm in so much. And by the way, thank you so much. This is the kind of conversation that I don't get to have very often. I love the podcast partners that we work with, but to have a co-biohacker who has been along this journey and has valuable things to contribute to it is really fun for me. So thank you. I really
thank you.
It.
My experiments are fairly simple. One thing I appreciate about you guys is you offer the notes, the app that takes copious notes or helps you take those notes, because it's so important when you're working with an ingredient, a product, whatever it is, to keep track of everything, so you can go back and look, okay, this helped, this actually hurt, because you'll converge on your ideal solution eventually, and it'll be different than mine most likely. And if you put that framework in place for consumers like me to be able to take these notes, it makes the whole process a lot easier.
It does. And thank you for saying that. It's absolutely true. Here's the deal. Personalized medicine is the future. We've been doing this for now going on 10 years, and actually going on 11 years. And I got to tell you, the difference between a off-the-shelf, one-size-fits-all formula and a customized solution is major. It's incredible. So I highly encourage your listeners to give it an opportunity to try it. We have 365-day money-back guarantee. So that's not a sales pitch. That's an encouragement to go take a risk. And the other cool thing is we work really diligently to make our stuff not only super safe, but we get we call it plant to pill or seed to supplement. We're working very closely with the farms that grow the herbs and other extract or compounds that we do, and our extraction technologies are really, really clean. We don't use any harsh chemicals or anything like that. So hopefully your body and mind will experience that benefit as well. Clarity, man. It's all clarity.
And for anyone out there that doesn't have phenomenal results, you can go ahead and send me yours, and I'm sure I'll use them, even though they're not customized to my neurochemistry. I'm sure they'll still work great.
I love it. Best secondary follow-up ever.
Well, Mr. Noots, if people want to connect with you or try Nootopia, how do they go about that?
So you want to go to Nootopia.com. Two things there. Once you go to Nootopia.com, you're going to go to, I love it. And by the way, you're going to go to Nootopia.com/Nick Urban. That would be great. And then Nick can continue podcasting. And so that's a start. And first, two things. One is we're going to give you a neurochemical test. At the top of our website, there's a button you'll push. It's a big old button that says, get your neurochemical profile. And it's really valuable for us, and it's also valuable for you. If any of your listeners have ever done a Strength Finder test or a Myers-Briggs, and they've had an opportunity to go, oh, that's who I am. That's my psychology. This is very similar, except it's your neurochemical balance. Like, what are you dominant in? What do you suck at? What could you use some help in, some heavy lifting? And it helps us in that. And then the other one is you're going to take a full physiological test. It's very quick. It's online. Probably take you 5 minutes. But basically we say, what's your age, sex, weight, height? What's your, do you work out? Do you train? What kind of foods do you eat? What kind of stims do you take, or what kind of meds or vitamins or nutrients or supplements? And then what are the goals that you have? And our goal is to make it so that you are able to make your goals happen. So it's great. And then we customize every capsule, every powder, every drink, and every spray specifically for you. And you'll get a box with these really cool things in them. You'll get to try them out. You got a 30-day path that we lay out for you, so you can try everything and in different combinations to optimize your output. And then you've got the app that lets us know feedback-wise what you've got. And then usually a week or two before you reorder, we either reach out to you, or you can go right on the app and say, hey, I want more of this, I want less of this, and I want these two at a higher level because I really got to crush it this next month, and we will make sure and formulate for your crushing.
Nice. And I have to say, your educational material is better than a paid Nootropics course I've taken. Not saying any names, but the book that I received was very helpful, along with the follow-up emails.
Oh, fantastic. So good to hear that, Nick. Thanks, brother.
Mm-hmm. And if people want to connect with you on socials, where would they go to find you there?
This is going to sound, I'm clearly an old man. I used to be super highly active. I'm getting active again. But if you go to Facebook, Mark Effinger, MarkEff as in Frank, Inger, you'll see me there. And then you go to Nootopia Brain on Instagram. And if you want, join our Nootopia Facebook page, which is Nootopia on Facebook.com/Nootopia. And we'd love to see you there. There's a lot of really interesting things. The girl that runs it, Sarah Jessica, is an incredible brain. She's also a bodybuilder, an athlete, a badass, and she asks really revealing, deep questions. And you'll find that a lot of the people in the Nootopia community are biohackers like yourself, Nick, who are super committed to helping people find performance. And they give us insights that are absolutely radically valuable in helping you get more clarity and basically get to the next level in your life.
Well, one more question before a quick rapid fire round, and we'll call it a day for round number 1. If there was a worldwide burning of the books and all knowledge on earth is lost, you get to save the works of 3 teachers. Who would you choose and why?
C.S. Lewis, not for his, a little bit for his fiction, because there's a book called The Great Divorce. It's about a bus trip from hell or purgatory, whatever people called it, to heaven. And even though I don't necessarily fall within that construct, I think it's an interesting one. I used to be a pretty radical Jesus freak at one time, and I say that with love. But it is really cool to kind of better understand people's motivations. So that's one. Strength Finder, which is both a test and a book. So, and that the author behind that studied at this point over 20 million people, and in that they've found these. Here's the insight on it. Nick, if you knew your strengths when you were 15 years old or 14 years old, if you absolutely guaranteed knew your core strengths, wouldn't that have been a much faster route to what you're doing today?
Yeah.
Like, right, if there was no question.
Yeah.
And so it's an incredible book on that. And then there's a couple others that kind of come to mind, but as far as books, one is Dave Barry's Greatest Hits. Dave Barry is a Floridian comic writer and also a guitarist in a band with Stephen King. But when it's great. I was going through my divorce many years ago. That book and journaling became, I did morning pages, that was really a lifesaver for me. So that'd be a really valuable one. But there's, depending on where you're headed in life, there's again that book called The Great Divorce, super critical, I think, really great. There's another one called Addicted to Mediocrity from a author named Frankie Schaefer. And Addicted to Mediocrity, again, it's a theologian's book, but it applies to life. And in fact, it has on the cover, it's got somebody with a coffee cup, like just a hand with a coffee cup, and it's got one of the Christian fish on it. And he's going, that is so not art. like if there's like this great superpower, this universal superpower, or this God or whatever, I don't think a fish on a coffee cup would be a great example of the expression of art, And so it's a great book that kind of throws that into the gauntlet. And then anything by Kurt Vonnegut Jr., Kurt Vonnegut. I would recommend Cat's Cradle. Breakfast of Champions was a life changer for me. My son just texted me today and said, "Dad, we love the same music. We love Incubus. We love Zeppelin. We love Radiohead. We love Johnny Greenwood. Who do you recommend as a book?" Because he wanted to see if we had any common threads on that. And and so that's really important. I would definitely go in that direction. So yeah, there's some. And by the way, if you're an entrepreneur, there's an old book out of print. You can get it used called The Entrepreneur's Manual. And it is probably one of the best books. It and The Diffusion of Innovations are the two business books that I recommend to any entrepreneur. The Entrepreneur's Manual is how to bootstrap your startup, and it's a great book on that, and how to raise venture capital, and how to write a business plan, and how to come up with an idea. And it's just a guide based on real stories of real individuals. And it's really cool. And then The Diffusion of Innovations is I would highly recommend everyone go see the movie Air, which is the study of the inside on how Nike grabbed Michael Jordan, and it's great. If you've read Swoosh and you've read Shoe Dog or listened to both those, fantastic books on Nike. Coming from the Pacific Northwest, they were one of the icons, and the guy that financed Nike, that raised the money for Nike, was my venture capital finance mentor. So I've raised over $50 million with the guy. Name is Jack Nichols, but he was the guy that raised the money initially for Nike, and then did it just before they went public. And and Shoe Dog is great. And but Nike Air and The Diffusion of Innovations. So the movie Air and The Diffusion of Innovations. If you like Air, read the book, because it explains in cool story but technical terms. By the way, it's used at Stanford, it's used at NYU in marketing. Prof G uses it as a tool. So anybody that's a Professor Galloway freak like I am, you'll find that. And it's really valuable to understand how people look at your product or service, through what lens, why, and how to basically become the GOAT in your field, and how to use that as a lever to eventually get to Ma and Pa Amber. So there you go.
Hard to not want that.
Right?
Well, Mark, how would you like to land this plane today? Are there any concluding thoughts you'd like to leave listeners with?
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. I really love the work you're doing. I think it's really important, and I'm glad that you're making it happen. So one is, know for a fact that regardless of your current state of being, whether it's rock star level or you're depressed and you've got a gun at your side and you're about to pull the trigger, that there is a way to change your state and to permanently grow from sick to superhuman. And I encourage everyone to take that journey. It's so well worth it. Whether you use I don't care if you use our products or not. I mean, I'd love you to use them, but more importantly, know that you're not stuck in whatever rut you might be in, and know that if you're a rock star, but you're relying on the scaffolding that's holding you up is starting to rust and fall apart, that there are sustainable ways to live in that environment. The way I like to put it is, you can, if you go to optimum, which is halfway to superhuman, you go to optimum, and that's where most people at their best day are living. But there's super optimal that we can all go to, and that's a really incredible place to go because it gives us hope that there's something more. And like a superhero, you can go to superhuman, but every once in a while you got to, dress like a normal guy, put on your Clark Kent shades, and and not be seen in public as a guy in tights, right? Like the boys. So anyhow, that's it.
That's an important message. And next time we'll talk about different things you can do to boost the effects of your nootropics, the ways to balance the performance and recovery, because too much performance without enough recovery leads to that decline that you were just mentioning. We'll talk more about personalization, some of the other products that you created that I haven't heard you discuss on podcasts, but I found when I was looking into your background, and a whole lot more.
Dude, that's so awesome. I can't wait. We got another one coming. I'm in.
Let's do it. All right. Well, I'm Nick Urban here with Mark Effinger, aka Mr. Noots, signing out from mindbodypeak.com. Have a great week and be an outlier. I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.